where inmates who have been convicted go to serve out their sentence. And what you're looking at is a murder scene. Apparently, a correctional officer was shot and killed this morning as he was on his way into work. They've identified him as 59-year-old Scott Reiner. He had been a correctional officer here for 10 years. They've got a very active scene right now. They do not know at this moment who they are looking for. They're trying to figure out if the person who shot this correctional officer fled on foot or perhaps a car that was waiting nearby. But they have got quite an investigation underway here at the Gwinnett County Correctional Facility. It's right next to the jail. The jail, they explained to me, is where you go, obviously, if you're awaiting trial. This side of the complex is where you go if you've already been convicted and you are serving out your sentence. Again, this is a worker, a man 59 years old, worked here for 10 years as a correctional officer. Shot and killed this morning at about 6:20 this morning. They have surveillance footage in the area. Obviously, they're looking through that now to see if they can figure out some clues to help lead them to the killer. But a very active investigation underway here in Lawrenceville, right next to the police department, right next to the jail and the correctional facility. I will be here on scene gathering information, and I'll have updates throughout the morning and this afternoon at noon here on Atlanta News First. Back to you guys.
Yeah, Rebecca, this is a developing story. Thank you for that. They are developing throughout the day. We send push alerts to your phone through our Atlanta News First app. It is really easy for you to download that. Just go to your app store. It's free, and that way you don't miss anything that happens. Well, millions of Americans are under
Alrighty, and you are looking at a live look right now at Gwinnett Correctional Center. This is the place of a homicide investigation that is now underway. Let's get you out to our reporter, Rebecca Schramm, who is at this scene right now. She's been there from most of the morning. We're gonna talk to her, get the latest details on this investigation. Rebecca, can you hear us?
Hi, Maria. Yes, I can hear you.
All right. We just heard from the Gwinnett County officials about this ongoing now homicide investigation. What can you tell us?
Well, Maria, I just spoke with Jennifer Richter. She's a public information officer for the Gwinnett County Police Department, and she gave us basically what she knows about this case. We can push in, give you an idea of what we're looking at here. This is a 59-year-old victim. He is a correctional officer who works here at the correctional complex here in Gwinnett County. It's on High Hope Road, which is right next to the jail, kind of attached to it. It's where inmates go once they have been convicted of a crime, and this is where they serve out their sentence for some of these crimes here in Gwinnett County. He was apparently headed to work this morning, 6:20 a.m., arrived here in the parking lot and was shot and killed. Now, who did this? How did this happen? Those are questions they're trying to answer right now. This is a 10-year veteran of the correctional facility here. He's worked here 10 years. It's unclear if this is someone he knew, if this was random, if this was some sort of domestic situation. They really are starting from scratch trying to figure out who this was. There is some surveillance camera. There's a network of cameras in this area somewhere, and they're going to be looking through some of those. I can actually see a camera over here to Joe's right up on a pole here. I'm not sure if that camera will be of any use to detectives as they search and try to find this killer. We don't know if the person fled on foot. They're not sure if perhaps there was a getaway car of some sort. But yeah, this happened early this morning, so before sunrise. 6:20 is when they got the call. Didn't have far to come. This is right next to the police station here in Gwinnett County. But yeah, just a devastating situation for these folks, the men and women of law enforcement. One of their own shot and killed arriving at work this morning. We're going to stay here on the scene, and we'll let you know when we learn anything else. I'm not sure if I told you his identity yet. 59-year-old Scott Reiner is the name we just got from Gwinnett County Police. 59-year-old Scott Reiner, again, a 10-year veteran of this facility here, this Gwinnett County Correctional Complex. Maria, back to you.
Becca, thank you so much. This is just unimaginable. We know you'll continue to follow this story, and we'll check back in with you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and just to recap, I know a few of you might have jumped in on this live stream, want to get you caught up to speed. There is currently an ongoing homicide investigation out of Gwinnett Correctional Center. This is on High Hope Road near Swanson Drive. Now, this is a live picture just outside of that correctional center. This is actually from our reporter who we just spoke to, Rebecca Schramm. She's on scene following this. We just moments ago heard from officials talking about the victim in this, who is a 10-year veteran of the Gwinnett County Correctional Center, Gwinnett County Police Force as well. So we are going to continue to follow this story right now on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com, and in our app, Atlanta News First. That is where we are pushing out the latest updates on what we learned. But right now, a very active investigation we're going to continue to monitor and bring to you as soon as we hear any new details right here from where you're watching. All right, and for those that are just joining us, got a little more information for you on this ongoing homicide investigation at Gwinnett Correctional Center. This happened just moments ago, about an hour ago. Gwinnett Police Homicide Unit responding to this area on High Hope Road near Swanson Drive. Now, as you can see, an active investigation still underway. We now have learned that a victim, 10-year veteran Scott Reiner, has been fatally shot at this Gwinnett Correctional Center. That is the latest on what we are following. You know, Gwinnett County losing one of their own in this unimaginable situation. This is something that he woke up this morning. Scott Reiner went to work as he usually does, and unfortunately, this is what transpired. Now an investigation fully underway. We are working on getting you the latest details involving who was responsible for his death, as well as just more information about who Scott Reiner was. We are checking in with our reporter, Rebecca Schramm. She's on scene. This is that live picture you're looking at from the ground as several units are investigating this and assisting with this active and ongoing matter. Now, if you wanted more information as we wait to hear from our Rebecca Schramm, this is where you can find the latest details on this story. It's on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com. This is where we're putting out any and all updates that do come into our newsroom as we talk to officials, as we talk to family members, and hopefully those that have been impacted by all this. You can see just the latest information, especially regarding this 59-year-old correctional officer, Scott Reiner, a 10-year veteran of the force, arriving to work at 6:20 a.m. Now 9:28. Unfortunately, he has been named the victim in this homicide investigation.
30, a correctional officer shot and killed in Gwinnett County.
Take a look at this map. This is happening on High Hope Road near Swanson Drive in Lawrenceville. Atlanta News First. Rebecca Schramm is live at the scene with new information. Rebecca.
Gervier, I tell you, it's been tough watching some of these law enforcement officers here at the scene at the Gwinnett Correctional Facility. This is one of their own murdered as he showed up for work this morning. Now, I want to point out, this is separate from the sheriff's office, separate from the police department. These are correctional officers. We're told 59-year-old Scott Reiner, who had been working as a correctional officer here for 10 years. He's considered a senior correctional officer. He was shot and killed this morning as he arrived for work. It was about 6:20 a.m., so it was still dark. And as he arrived, according to police, someone shot and killed him. His body here in the parking lot. They're working now to remove that body. Obviously, we're not showing you that. It's something certainly that's disturbing on any level. But yeah, these are men and women who are trying to work this case knowing one of their own has been murdered, a man of law enforcement. So a lot of heavy hearts here outside the Gwinnett Correctional Facility. This is connected to the jail. If you're familiar with this area, High Hope Road is where all of this is unfolding. Again, 59-year-old Scott Reiner, a 10-year veteran of this department, shot and killed as he arrived to work. The question is, who did this? And that is something police are trying to figure out right now, looking through surveillance footage here in the parking lot, trying to figure out and piece it together. Who was this? Was this someone the man knew? Was it a co-worker? Obviously, that would be something they would have already figured out. So we certainly don't think that is the case. But was this someone he was familiar with? Was it a random situation? Was it a domestic? All of these are things that they're asking right now as they try to put this together. I asked if it's possible that the suspect fled on foot, and they say that is possible. But there's always a chance there was a getaway car nearby. Many questions still to be answered as detectives work this case. We will continue to stay here on the scene, and as we learn more, we'll bring it to you. We're live in Gwinnett County. Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
Yeah, just terrible this morning. Hopefully some of that surveillance video will be useful in that investigation. Rebecca, thank you so much for that. This is a developing story. We'll be sending out push alerts to your phone on the Atlanta News First app. If you don't have the app, get it. Very easy to do. It's free to get in your app store.
All right.
And the latest there from our Rebecca Schramm. Wanted to take you to our on-air coverage just so you can get an update of where this investigation currently is. But as you can see, this is a very personal situation for a lot of these men and women in uniform, having to investigate a death involving one of their own. Again, 59-year-old Scott Reiner, now identified as the victim in this shooting. We are continuing to talk with police and investigators, as well as surrounding community members that may have witnessed this, and remain with you on the ground at this scene as we wait out for developments. Right now, the biggest update I can tell you is that no arrests have been made. Investigators are looking through surveillance video to try and identify the shooter in this case, but the victim, we can confirm, is Scott Reiner, 59-year-old Scott Reiner. He was a 10-year veteran at the Gwinnett Correctional Center, showed up to work at 6:20 a.m. and, not expecting something like this. This is something, as many men and women of law enforcement know, is a reality of their job, but definitely not something that they expect to ever have to live through. And now these members, these fellow co-workers, essentially a family, now having to deal with this loss and conduct an investigation. We can just imagine what must be going through their hearts right now. Now you are taking a look at Gwinnett Correctional Center. This is the scene of a homicide investigation. As we've been reporting to you throughout the morning, Gwinnett Correctional Center officers, several units assisting with this matter, all involving a 59-year-old correctional officer, now identified as Scott Reiner, a 10-year veteran of the force. Now, I wanted to get into a little bit of detail about what we've learned since we first joined you here on Atlanta News First. This is very much an ongoing investigation. They have confirmed to us that no arrests have been made at this time. However, they are scrubbing through surveillance video to try and identify who the shooter might have been. What you're looking at right now, that is a live picture from the ground where this investigation continues to head underway. You can see several members of law enforcement, just vehicles lined up as well. We spoke to our reporter on the ground, Rebecca Schramm, who said earlier that they had to move the body of the correctional officer, Scott Reiner, and that just was a difficult and unimaginable experience. You imagine these are fellow coworkers, essentially a second family for this correctional officer, somebody that they personally knew, now investigating his unexpected and fatal shooting death. Again, no arrest has been made at this time. The shooter not identified at the moment, but they are looking through a surveillance video to try and identify who this person was. A little bit of background about exactly how this all transpired. Scott Reiner, the 59-year-old correctional officer of Gwinnett County, arriving to work at 6:20 a.m., a typical Tuesday morning for him. Now, the reality is that he is at the center of this homicide investigation, named the victim in this investigation. Now, fellow officers are working hard to find who was responsible. We are continuing to monitor the situation. I wanted to show you exactly where this is. Pulled up a map here for you. If you zoom out a little, you can kind of get a better idea. This is the Gwinnett County Department of Corrections. Now, you can see exactly where this is just in this map, of course, but the best way that I can show you this is through this live picture we've been bringing you from our field crew on the ground, just talking to these investigators, talking to possible surrounding witnesses. Right now, investigation remains underway. We are monitoring for any updates in this case, including whether an arrest is going to be made, whether the shooter has been identified. Right now, no arrests, and they are working to identify the person responsible. A little bit of background for you while we wait for those updates just about Gwinnett County Department of Corrections. Now, this is a housing complex for correctional complex. It's an 800-bed facility located on High Hope Road, just in Lawrenceville. Now, the facility opened all the way back in September of 2002 and contains 512 beds for medium and minimum security state and county inmates. And now those inmates are those who have been sentenced to full-time incarceration. These are inmates that are assigned to supervised work crews that provide supplemental labor force to Gwinnett County. But again, these are inmates that are a medium to minimum security in the Gwinnett County area. Now, inmates typically perform most janitorial, landscaping services at the Gwinnett County Justice and Administration Center. They also maintain the landscaping along Ronald Reagan Parkway, also performing just similar tasks at other county-owned buildings, roadways, and parks. But this picture that you're looking at, this is of Gwinnett Correctional Center down in Lawrenceville, showing you this facility that houses up to 512 beds for medium and minimum security state and county inmates. Now, the comprehensive correctional complex also contains 288 work release program beds for criminal offenders and parents who fail to pay court-ordered child support. A little bit of more detail for you about this correctional center here in Gwinnett County, but the main focus that we are following right now for those that might be jumping in and out of this stream is looking out for any updates on a possible arrest or identification of the shooter in this active homicide investigation. We've since learned that 59-year-old correctional officer Scott Reiner has been named the victim in this shooting. He was fatally shot and has been pronounced dead on the scene. The shooter not identified at this time. We have learned from Gwinnett County investigators that they are looking through surveillance footage and nearby evidence to try to identify and locate this shooter. But at this time, a very active scene for you. A lot of these investigators having a possible connection to Scott Reiner. You talk about a Gwinnett Correctional Officer. This is one of their own. So this is a very personal and very unimaginable morning for these guys. Now, to put just some of this in perspective for you, just in 2022, 5 Georgia law enforcement officers have been killed in the line of duty. We have brought you previous coverage and continued coverage on Atlanta News First into each of these unimaginable deaths, but this just the latest in that line this year. Last year in 2021, 8 officers were killed while serving. Again, 5 this year, 8 the previous year. Now we have since learned 59-year-old correctional officer Scott Reiner, the latest victim in a fatal shooting, arriving to work this morning at 6:20 a.m. when he was shot and killed in the parking lot of Gwinnett Correctional Center. The shooter not identified at this time. We have learned from these investigators that you're looking at, from these investigators on scene, that they are working through evidence, surveillance footage, and anything that can help them identify the person responsible and hopefully make an arrest. Right now, no arrest has been made at this time. This is at High Hope Road near Swanson Drive. This is more accurately at Gwinnett Correctional Center, where a homicide investigation continues at this time. I am looking through some of your comments. If you have any questions, I did just want to reiterate, we do have a reporter, Rebecca Schramm. She's on the ground monitoring the situation, as well as our staff here at Atlanta News First, talking to officials and keeping updates on the latest on what we know into this homicide investigation. We'll recap here in just a bit, but I want to make sure there aren't any questions, any details that anybody's looking for. I hear a lot of condolences. Yes, again, this is a very difficult situation. You talk about having to conduct an investigation into somebody that you possibly worked with and spent every day with. Scott Reiner, a 10-year veteran of the Gwinnett Correctional Center, 59 years old, walking into work on a Tuesday morning, like I'm sure many of us, not expecting something like this, and just the toll this must have on his law enforcement family, on his family that's receiving this news this morning. So we are monitoring all sides of this story. Again, no shooter has been identified, no arrest has been made at this time. a homicide investigation very much underway. We have heard from Gwinnett County officials that they are looking through surveillance footage and other evidence surrounding the parking lot area where this all went down, just to see if that can lead them to identifying and then locating the person responsible. This all broke out a couple hours ago, I want to say just before 8 a.m. Scott Reiner walking into work at 6:20, being shot and killed in the parking lot. Now an investigation into the shooting and more of what exactly happened, whether this was targeted and who was the person responsible. Just to give you a little bit of background about this correctional center that you're looking at, live picture here. This is in Lawrenceville on High Hope Road. This is a comprehensive correctional complex. It houses about 800 beds, 512 beds utilized for medium and minimum security state and county inmates out of Gwinnett County. Now, this is an area for inmates that have been sentenced to full-time incarceration. These are inmates that are regularly assigned supervised work that provides supplemental labor to Gwinnett County. So just to explain that a little better, these inmates perform janitorial duties, landscaping services regularly to the Gwinnett County Justice and Administration Center, as well as along Ronald Reagan Parkway, similar tasks to other county-owned buildings, roadways, and parks as well. So this is, again, Gwinnett Correctional Center, the scene of a homicide investigation after 59-year-old correctional officer Scott Reiner, after arriving to work at 6:20 a.m., shot and killed in the parking lot, this parking lot that you're looking at right now. You can see some of those investigators standing around, likely members of this Gwinnett Correctional Center who personally may have known Scott Reiner. It is a very personal and unimaginable day for these investigators, for these individuals that remain on the scene, both balancing the job of law enforcement and grieving the loss of someone that they were possibly close to and knew on a day-to-day basis. Again, a typical Tuesday, Scott Reiner arriving to work, as you heard from our Rebecca Schramm, not imagining something like this, being shot and killed in the parking lot. Now the focus turning to finding the person responsible, going through any and all evidence, surveillance that might be available, and trying to identify who this shooter was and bringing them in. Once we do hear any updates regarding an arrest, we will bring you that update right here and on AtlantaNewsFirst.com, as well as our Atlanta News First app. But at this time, what we're being told is no arrest has been made. They are working on identifying the shooter. Thought I'd pull up this map for you, stepped away to do that, showing you exactly where this is in Lawrenceville on High Hope Road. The Gwinnett County Department of Corrections, the scene of this homicide investigation. You can see just as I zoom out where that is in proximity to Atlanta, but zooming back in just to give you a better picture from the air of just how large this facility is and where exactly this homicide essentially took place. You can see the parking lot. Hopefully if you see my cursor, there it is. You can see the parking lot. This is where unfortunately 59-year-old correctional officer Scott Reiner was fatally shot and killed this morning after arriving to work at Gwinnett Correctional Center. The parking lot is now the scene of this investigation. Taking you back out to this live picture, several units remaining on scene, Gwinnett County Police assisting, and several members of Gwinnett Correctional Center you can see just in the parking lot based off of their uniform, trying to process this loss. A lot of these people possibly reflecting on, coming into work every day, parking their cars in that same parking lot, and now the scene of a homicide investigation that took one of their own. Now, I was just able to pull the latest transcript from a press conference we received from Gwinnett County officials. I'm going to read that to you here. Just the latest on what we've learned from these officials. The detectives and officers are following any leads, but the best that they could provide us at this time this morning was that the victim, Scott Reiner, was involved in some sort of confrontation interaction with another individual in the parking lot. That individual then shooting him. The search for the person now underway. No arrests being made at this time. Unfortunately, 59-year-old Scott Reiner named the victim of this deadly shooting. He is the center of this investigation for a lot of these investigators who may have personally knew him or have worked at the Gwinnett Correctional Center, or actively work there, just trying to process this while also conducting the search for the person responsible. Now, we are monitoring any and all updates. If you have any questions, giving you a little bit more context to what exactly happened here. 6:20 this morning, Scott Reiner arriving to work, a typical Tuesday, as I'm sure a lot of us are going through, coming to work at 6:20, having this confrontation in the parking lot just outside of the Gwinnett Correctional Center, and then being fatally shot. And now the focus turns to finding the person responsible, locating and identifying the shooter in this investigation, while also processing the loss of losing a fellow law enforcement officer. To date, we've had 5 law enforcement deaths, law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty just in 2022 alone. This the latest of that number. Some other details for you as I'm going through this transcript. Now, Gwinnett officials do believe that the person who was the shooter in this case fled on foot. So that person running away from the scene, the search for the individual now underway. They do not believe at this time that the shooter had a vehicle that they used to flee the scene. They do believe the person fled on foot. That is the latest on what they know. And they also added that they are working through surveillance footage and any and all evidence that could help them in identifying who may have been responsible. That surveillance footage being the most promising right now in identifying the individual. Again, they also added, you know, one of our reporters asked, is this a random act? Was this targeted? I think that is on a lot of people's minds, especially some of you in the comments here. The official word, it's still too early to know if this could have been a random or targeted act. They are following every avenue and every possibility at this time just to figure out what exactly was the motive and what caused this to take place. Again, in the parking lot of Gwinnett Correctional Center, that is the scene of this investigation. Showing you right now investigators, several members of Gwinnett Correctional Center standing in that same parking lot where 59-year-old Scott Reiner was fatally shot. The search for the person responsible now underway. That person has not been identified at this time. We did hear from Gwinnett officials, from these investigators earlier this morning. They provided us some details, but really the main word was, we just don't know a whole lot right now, and we are working on bringing in the person responsible and finding and locating them at this time. Giving you a little additional context about this correctional center while we continue to follow this very active investigation. This is on High Hope Road in Lawrenceville. Now, this is a facility that opened up back in September of 2002. It contains on average about 512 beds for medium and minimum security state and county inmates. Now, these are inmates that are incarcerated. They have been sentenced to full-time incarceration. These are not jailed persons that are awaiting trial. These are persons that are full-time serving their sentences. Now, some of these inmates assigned to work duties in the community, most of those duties being janitorial, landscaping for the Gwinnett County Justice Administration Center, as well as Ronald Reagan Parkway and other county-owned buildings, roadways, and parks. This is very much a buzzing Gwinnett Correctional Center, a buzzing home for inmates, but I will say right now what it is the center of a homicide investigation. That taking place right in the parking lot that you're looking at. Several investigators still remaining on scene, just combing through every possible piece of evidence that they might come across that could help them identify and later locate the shooter. That has not happened at this time. We have since learned that the shooter was believed to be involved in some sort of confrontation with the victim, 59-year-old Scott Reiner, and that led to Reiner being fatally shot. The alleged shooter fleeing on foot. Now a chase underway to try to locate this individual. Again, these law enforcement officials, some of which are part of Gwinnett Correctional Center and likely knew Scott Reiner, are having to navigate this morning the unexpected loss of their colleague, of their friend, of their fellow law enforcement officers, while also performing their job to find the person responsible and bring this safety back to the community. Now, as you can see, a crime scene tape surrounding the perimeter of this parking lot, the sheriff walking by, several members of Gwinnett County law enforcement on scene conducting this investigation of one of their own, correctional officer, 59-year-old Scott Reiner, who was a correctional officer for 10 years, now at the center of this investigation, named the victim, as the search for the shooter continues. Now, we are going to monitor the situation and continue to bring you updates both on AtlantaNewsFirst.com and in the Atlanta News First app. That is where we'll send you any major notifications, including that arrest that we are anticipating right now. The latest word from Gwinnett County officials who we are communicating with, both from the ground and from here at Atlanta News First, just letting us know that they are working on identifying and locating the person responsible using anything from surveillance footage, from nearby evidence, ballistic evidence, anything and everything that could help them identify the person responsible. That is their focus right now, is bringing that person in and really trying to find out what the motive behind all this was. We heard in a press conference earlier this morning and from our reporter Rebecca Schramm, who was on the ground, saying that the Scott Reiner, I should say, the victim in this situation had some sort of altercation, some sort of confrontation, I should say, with the alleged shooter, and that escalated, the shooter fatally killing Scott Reiner, now launching an investigation into how this all happened and what was the reason behind such a violent act in the parking lot outside of this individual's place of work. We are working on trying to learn if this is connected to whether connected to Scott Reiner, whether this was a random act of violence. That is not known at this time. What we do know is that they are searching for a suspect. They are searching for who fired that shot that took the life of a fellow law enforcement officer, right now marking the 6th law enforcement death of 2022. All right, and bringing you back out to the map that we have of this Gwinnett County Department of Corrections. I'm going to try to see if we can get that camera back up, but just showing you here where this exactly took place. So if you can follow my cursor here, this is the Gwinnett County Department of Corrections in the parking lot. That is where the scene of the crime is specifically. That is where a 59-year-old corrections officer, Scott Reiner, was fatally shot after another individual confronted him. There was some sort of a back and forth, and Scott Reiner was shot and killed in this parking lot just on 750 High Hope Road, where this correctional facility is located. Now, just to give you some additional context about this correctional facility, this is the on High Hope Road in Lawrenceville. This is a facility that's been running and operating since September of 2002. It averages about 512 beds for medium and minimum security state and county inmates. Those are inmates who are fully incarcerated. They are serving their sentences. They are not awaiting trial or in a transit period. These are inmates that have been tried and sentenced to full-time incarceration. Now, some of these inmates within this facility that you're looking at, they are responsible for supervised work, including janitorial and landscaping services for Gwinnett County. That includes janitorial services for Gwinnett County Justice and Administration Center, as well as landscaping along the Ronald Reagan Parkway, as well as similar tasks for county-owned buildings, roadways, and parks. This is that map showing you here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The parking lot really is where you saw just there before our live shot disappeared. That is where crime scene tape was surrounding the perimeter. Several units of Gwinnett County law enforcement, both police, Gwinnett County Correctional Center individuals, fellow employees of Scott Reiner, as well as other members just showing you this picture of the parking lot, taking you to an aerial view of where this exactly went down. A confrontation led to gun violence. Now the search for the person responsible. Again, the big speculation and the big thing that's on a lot of people's minds is, was this targeted? Was this a random act? You talk about a correctional officer that arrived at work at 6:20 a.m. For a typical Tuesday shift, and now at the center of a homicide investigation, the victim of a homicide just in the parking lot outside of his place of work. The search for that shooter continues at this time. Again, this is something that we are going to continue to monitor. We are regularly checking in with Gwinnett County officials, talking to any and all investigators that have involvement in this search for the shooter. That is something that we are going to bring you on AtlantaNewsFirst.com. I'm going to show you the web article. This is exactly where you can find that information. But personally, the easiest way to find info, and especially those updates as you have been joining us on this live stream, is by downloading the Atlanta News First app. Any and all notifications on major breaking news story updates get sent directly to your phone. It takes you right to this article, latest details laid out for you so you don't miss a thing. Again, taking you to this map, just showing you an aerial view, this parking lot right here, that is the scene of this investigation. 59-year-old Scott Reiner, named the victim of a homicide, now a fellow law enforcement officers, Gwinnett County Police, Gwinnett County Sheriff's, we saw office on the scene, as well as other members of the Gwinnett Correctional Center, all involved in assisting with the search for his shooter. Now, what we do know is Scott Reiner was a 10-year veteran of the Gwinnett Correctional Center. This is a center that houses incarcerated inmates. I know there was some sort of questions in the comments regarding whether this was for jail detainees or incarcerated persons. This is a facility for fully incarcerated individuals, members who are serving their sentences in Gwinnett County. But this parking lot, this is where it all went down this morning. Now, the victim, 59-year-old Scott Reiner, arriving to work at 6:20 a.m., parking in this parking lot, as I'm sure he did every day that he came to work, and a confrontation ensuing with the alleged shooter. And that is the latest on what we heard from Gwinnett County officials from that press conference we covered this morning, saying there was some sort of confrontation with an individual, that individual then allegedly shooting Scott Reiner, killing him in that parking lot. Now, the search for the shooter continues to be underway. There have been no arrests at this time. They are looking, I should say, investigators are looking through surveillance evidence, anything that can help them identify who the person responsible was and whether this was a random act of violence or possibly a targeted one. We're going to have all of that information on AtlantaNewsFirst.com as well as the Atlanta News First app.